there are a lot of people that are not seeing eye to eye with Kevin Stefanski's decision to run the ball as few times today as he did. Let's see, the Browns finished the day with 107 yards on the ground. They ran it 24 times. And obviously they were a little bit more willing to air it out a bit, with DTR throwing 29 times. PJ Walker threw it 13 times. So,
all right.
40.
Here's where I'm at, fellas. I want to get your thoughts. I think Kevin Stefanski's got to win this press conference today. And I know there are a lot of people who may go, who gives a damn? But you're already up against it. There are people in our city who are not convinced that you're the guy or that this hire should have gone down. And so, Mike, I think it's important for him to come across in a way that resonates with the fan base.
Right.
And I don't know if it's possible.
About Kevin Stefanski, two-time coach of the year, clearly can coach, knows what he's doing. I understand that. But ladies and gentlemen, this man was in Cleveland for about 6 years, had 13 different quarterbacks. One of them was Baker Mayfield. Another was Jacoby Brissett. Obviously Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, various others. Nothing could work. Nothing could work. Why should I feel excited about Kevin Stefanski being in Atlanta when you got Michael Penix Jr., who can't even line up behind center because it requires him to bend his knees too much?
The pressure isn't slowing down, it's building, and ownership can only hold the line for so long. Why should I feel excited about Kevin Stefanski being in Atlanta when you got Michael Penix Jr., who can't even line up behind center because it requires him to bend his knees too much? So don't skip a single second of this video, and if this story touches your heart, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's begin. This isn't noise. This is a warning shot, the kind you only hear when a fan base is done being polite, done being patient, done being told to wait and see like we haven't already seen the movie. And I'm telling you right now, if you think this is just Twitter yelling, you haven't been paying attention. Because fans don't move like this for fun. Fans complain every day, that's the NFL. We argue about play calling, we fight over quarterbacks, we blame coordinators, we call for jobs after one bad Sunday. That part is normal, but what we're watching here, this is different. This is coordinated. This is organized. This is the kind of revolt that doesn't happen unless something deeper got hit, something personal, something that made people feel like their team just crossed a line. And the craziest part, this isn't even after a losing streak. This isn't after a collapse in December. This isn't after Stefanski stands at the podium with that tight jaw giving you nothing while the season burns. Nah, this is before he even coaches a single regular season snap in Atlanta. That's what makes it so wild. That's what makes it undeniable. Because NFL fans, as emotional as we are, usually wait. We wait because we want to be right. We wait because hope is a drug and we'll talk ourselves into almost anything. Maybe he learned. Maybe the situation was different. Maybe with our roster he'll cook. We've all done it. We've all convinced ourselves a hire is smarter than it feels. We've all ignored that little voice that says, something about this don't sit right. But Atlanta didn't wait. Atlanta said no, not this time. And when a fan base refuses to wait, it's not about being impatient, it's about not trusting the people making the decisions. It's a collision between fans, ownership, and credibility. It's the moment where the relationship cracks. Because once fans stop believing the front office is protecting the team's future, everything changes. Every press conference feels like a lie. Every promise feels like a cover-up. Every trust the process starts sounding like shut up and pay. And ownership always underestimates that until it's too late. They think it's just a loud pocket online. They think it'll pass once training camp starts. They think a couple wins and a fancy offensive game plan will calm everybody down. But that's not how it works when the outrage moves fast. Speed matters more than volume. A slow wave is just frustration. A fast wave is panic. A fast wave is a sign people have been holding receipts, waiting for the moment to unload them. And that's what this feels like. Like a fan base has been watching, remembering, collecting every red flag in the second this hire happened, all that tension finally snapped. So don't tell me this is overreaction. Overreaction is calling for a firing after one bad game. This is a preemptive strike. This is a community saying, we are not letting this become our problem. We are not letting this become our culture. And that brings us to the real question, the one nobody in the front office wants to answer out loud. What did Atlanta fans see? What did they believe they saw that made them say no more before Kevin Stefanski ever coached a snap? He didn't walk into a clean slate, he walked straight into a city that already had scars. And that's the part people outside Atlanta keep missing. On paper, this hire looks logical, experienced head coach, Offensive background, been in big games, knows how to manage a room, that's the resume talking. But football isn't played on paper and trust isn't built on LinkedIn bullet points. It's built on memory, and this fan base remembers everything. This team has been searching for an identity for years now, not just a scheme and identity. Ever since the old era ended, it's been one reset after another. New voices, new promises, same uncertainty, and every time fans are told, just give it time, trust the process. That phrase is poison here because the process has burned them before. Now layer in the quarterback situation, and this thing gets even more volatile. You've got a young quarterback who isn't just a player, he's a symbol, potential, direction, hope. Whether it's Shedeur Sanders or whoever ends up being the face of this thing, fans see the same movie playing again. A talented young arm walking into a situation where development, belief, and protection actually matter. And they're asking one simple question: is this the guy you trust with that responsibility? That's why the offensive genius talk isn't landing. Fans have heard it before. They've seen creative play designs on Twitter screenshots. They've listened to analysts explain why something should work if everyone just stays patient. But they've also watched games where the offense stalled, quarterbacks got hung out to dry, and accountability always seemed to flow downward. Reputation says one thing, results say another, and fan memory, that's undefeated. This market is sensitive to leadership for a reason. Atlanta isn't just watching wins and losses, they're watching how people are treated, who gets empowered, who gets blamed, who gets protected by the microphone after a bad Sunday. And when fans look at this hire, they don't see a fresh start, they see familiar patterns wrapped in new branding. You can tell them the situation is different now. You can tell them the roster is better. You can tell them the lessons were learned. But fans aren't listening to words anymore, they're listening to history. They remember how quickly trust evaporates when things get tight. They remember how young quarterbacks get labeled instead of developed. They remember how excuses show up faster than adjustments. That's the gap right now. Media framing versus lived experience. Resume versus reality. Optimism versus instinct. And instinct is screaming louder than any press conference ever could. Because this hire didn't calm anyone down, it reopened wounds fans thought they'd finally moved past. And the wild part, they recognized it instantly, not after a bad game, not after a losing streak, immediately. And if fans are reacting this fast, this early, before a single snap is played, you've got to ask yourself why. This is where it stops being about football decisions and starts being about trust getting broken. Because fans aren't reacting like this over one bad call or one rough season, they're reacting to a pattern. A pattern they believe they've already seen play out in real time with real consequences on a young quarterback who never got a fair shake. And once fans lock onto a pattern, it doesn't matter how many explanations you offer, they're done listening. This backlash got personal because it felt personal. What people call mishandling, fans call sabotage. What analysts brush off as fit issues, fans remember as opportunities denied. And that difference matters, because mistakes happen in the NFL, everybody knows that. Coaches misread, schemes fail, seasons fall apart. But when the same kind of decisions keep happening to the same type of player, that's when fans stop seeing coincidence and start seeing intent. They watched a young quarterback get benched instead of built. They watched confidence erode week by week. They watched praise disappear the second things went right and blame show up instantly when things went wrong. And they watched accountability flow one way down, never up. That's why this isn't viewed as a one-time error, it's viewed as a reflection of ego, of self-preservation, of a coach protecting his system, his image, his comfort, even if it meant burning a young player's future in the process. And fans don't forgive that easily, especially when it involves power. Because the power dynamic in the NFL is real. Coaches control reps, coaches control narratives, coaches control who gets framed as not ready versus not supported. And when that power gets used without transparency, without honesty, without ownership, fans feel it, players feel it even more. That's where the fear comes from, the fear that history isn't just remembered, it's about to be repeated. They saw it once. They documented it. They lived through it. And they're not doing it again. That repetition isn't hype, it's memory, it's the feeling of watching a situation spiral and being told you're imagining it. Being told to be patient while something you care about slowly collapses. Fans don't forget that, they internalize it. And yes, there's another layer here that can't be ignored, not sensationalized, not exaggerated, but acknowledged, because when patterns repeatedly impact young black quarterbacks, fans don't view it in a vacuum. They see history, they see context, they see a league that hasn't always protected or believed in those players the same way. So when a coach with that track record gets another chance, especially in a city that understands that dynamic deeply, the reaction is heavier, louder, more urgent. That weight doesn't make the backlash weaker, it makes it more serious. This isn't about piling on, this isn't about canceling someone over a bad season. This is about values, about leadership, about whether someone entrusted with shaping young careers understands the responsibility that comes with that power. Because in the end, this isn't about one quarterback. It's about what kind of leader you're willing to follow. This is the moment where talking turns into leverage, and that's when everything gets real. Because protests don't scare NFL owners, angry tweets don't scare NFL owners, talk radio rants don't scare NFL owners. That stuff comes with the job, that's background noise. What scares owners is when fans stop sounding emotional and start acting strategic. When the frustration isn't just loud, it's organized. When it's not just passion, it's pressure. That's what's happening here. These fans didn't just vent and move on, they showed up. They coordinated, they kept showing up again and again. And most importantly, they targeted the only language the league truly understands: money, brand, and stability. This is why ticket holders matter more than anybody else in this equation. Season ticket holders aren't casual fans, they're the backbone, they're predictable revenue. They're the people franchises quietly rely on to keep everything steady even when the product slips. And when those people start saying, "We're done," it's not symbolic, it's structural. That's why this feels different, because these aren't empty threats. These are fans willing to walk away, willing to cancel, willing to sit out Sundays, willing to make it uncomfortable not just inside the stadium but outside it too. That's not emotion, that's discipline. And then there's the silence from players, which honestly says everything. Players don't usually get involved in fan movements, not publicly, not when careers are on the line. So when players stay quiet but the noise keeps growing, that's not disapproval, that's caution. That's guys watching, waiting, understanding exactly why fans are upset but knowing they can't be the ones to say it out loud. In this league, silence is rarely indifference. Most of the time, it's self-preservation. And ownership knows that too. That's where the pressure starts to compound. Because now it's not just about football decisions, it's about brand damage, it's about sponsor discomfort, it's about businesses quietly asking questions behind closed doors, it's about executives wondering whether this controversy is going to follow them all season or longer. And the ripple effect spreads fast. Bars, restaurants, corporate partners, local media, everything connected to game day energy starts feeling it. That's when an organization realizes this isn't just about one coach anymore, it's about perception, about trust, about whether fans still feel proud wearing the logo. This isn't loud, this is expensive. And now ownership is trapped in the worst position you can be in as a franchise leader, because standing firm has consequences. Digging in makes you look disconnected, arrogant, out of touch with the people who fund the entire operation. But backing down, that opens another door, one where fans realize their voice actually matters, and that door never fully closes again. That's the tension hanging in the air right now. No easy exits, no clean solutions, just pressure building from both sides. And the longer this drags on, the higher the cost gets. This is where the story stops being about one hire and starts becoming something bigger than any single franchise. Because I'm not here to tell you someone's getting fired tomorrow, that's not the point. The point is impact. The point is what just changed. And whether the league is ready to admit it or not, something shifted the moment fans refused to stay quiet and refused to wait. What we're watching right now is a reminder that fans aren't powerless. They've just been trained to think they are, trained to believe their role ends at the gate, trained to accept decisions, explain them away, and move on. But this moment cracked that illusion. Because when fans organize, when they align, when they decide culture matters as much as wins, the ground underneath the league starts to move. And this isn't just Atlanta. Every fan base in the NFL is watching this, every frustrated market. Every city that's been told next year for a decade, every fan who's watched young players get mishandled and then blamed for it. They're watching to see if this works. They're watching to see if speaking up early actually changes anything or if silence is still the price of admission. That's why organizations may have to rethink the whole wait and see philosophy, because waiting has always favored the people in charge. Waiting buys time, waiting lets narratives harden, waiting turns accountability into hindsight. But what happens when fans stop waiting, when they say, "No, we're judging this now, not after the damage is done"? That's uncomfortable for the league, and it should be. Because culture doesn't fix itself, it's protected or it's ignored. And silence? Silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice, just like resistance is a choice, just like speaking up is a choice. And fans are realizing that the only leverage they have is the willingness to use it together. That's the real takeaway here, not outrage, not controversy, unity. They spoke early. They spoke together. And they spoke loud enough to be heard. And now the question is whether ownership is listening. It's what they do with what they heard. Because once fans realize their voice carries weight, you don't get to pretend it doesn't exist anymore. You don't get to rewind that moment. You don't get to unring that bell. So I'll leave you with this, and I want you to really sit with it. What would you tolerate if it was your team? When does patience stop being loyalty and start becoming permission? And when it really comes down to it, who owns a franchise? The front office that signs the checks, or the people who keep it alive every single Sunday?